Good morning and welcome to our devotions for today, Monday. It's the first full week in the season of Lent, and it is truly a joy to be here with you today to share in this time of devotion. That love may abound is our theme, that love may abound. We are intent on pulling away and moving away all that covers that love that we are, so that we may discern ourselves as we truly are. We go into this season of Lent to truly be with the divine and to, in some way, allow ourselves to become more of that light that God intends us to be. So as we join this day, we come in a special way during this season of Lent, and I want us to approach our devotions during this Lenten season from a different place. And when I say a different place, I mean that we may be more intentional to not just spend this time in the morning, but in some way be intentional in looking into this experience as the day goes by. You know, we as Christians, we have these various observances, and sometimes when you look at others, which we really shouldn't look at others as such, but when we cast our eyes on others and how they observe their practices, we can see somehow a greater devotion and a greater intention about their actions. The quality of it, I'm not here to judge, but just the attitude that is brought to their times of devotions and the way in which they do not allow anything to interrupt or get in the way. Well, friends, Lent is one of those seasons for us, if not the season for us, where this becomes extremely important. And so I want us to join with me and see if we can really observe this Lent in the fullest possible way, so that we can find that place within ourselves that we desire to find so badly. And so we find our little space, our little pustina, that little hut where usually there is nothing more than a bed, an ordinary bed, a little chair and a table with a Bible on it, with the intention of just focusing on the divine. It's our inner chamber where we go in and we shut the door. And so this Lent, I want to invite us to be in our pustinas every chance that we get to be in that space. And so now I invite you to just find your space for a few moments and just let's rest in that quiet. In this place of quiet, we turn our attention to the Holy One. We come into that space, that divine space. We come into our hearts. And in this time of Lent, let our focus be on ourselves. We may be amazed at the ways in which we are able to bring healing to our world, bring help to our world, by simply looking within. We generally think that to fix an issue we have to address the issue. But there are ways that we can address issues by seeing how we contribute to them. And we contribute to them when we aren't shining enough light into our world. And by not shining enough light into our world, we allow a greater darkness. So rather than go out to fight the darkness, instead I invite you to clean the lampshade, raise the wick, or for those of you who may not be accustomed to lamps, turn up the rheostat on the light. Let it shine with greater brilliance. That the darkness may be scattered, and that love may abound. If there was ever a time in a season of Lent where each Christian soul, each faithful soul, each seeker of the divine needed to allow their light to shine at maximum capacity, it is this Lent. So we come away from the latest news. We come away from the latest information about conditions and situations, and we apply ourselves to the work of cleansing, the work of purifying. This is the task that we are assigned. And this is what we must do at this time. So here we are. Moment by moment. Clearing the debris of life, clearing all that we have fallen into, all that is no longer helpful. And in that space, at Pustinia, we allow all these things that have no use to fall away. Intending, desiring to let love abound, let love shine through. That the world might have a greater experience of love. Because I have and you have allowed our love to shine through. The prayer we offer is a prayer of thankfulness. A prayer that just says, we are grateful. We are grateful that we are here. We are grateful that we have this opportunity to contribute We're grateful that we have been invited to know what love is. We're grateful that we have been invited to allow ourselves to be used by the divine in these troubled times. We're grateful. We are grateful that God has called us to be His own. We're grateful that we still have the breath to allow ourselves to respond to that call. That we may be beacons set on a hillside, radiating out and covering the earth. We are so grateful. We are so grateful that God is God. And God has made us in His own image. In our reading today, Mark tells of the baptism of Jesus. In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And just as he was coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart and the Spirit descending like a dove on him. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, the beloved. With you I am well pleased." And the Spirit immediately drove him out into the wilderness. He was in the wilderness 40 days, tempted by Satan. And he was with the wild beasts, and the angels waited on him. The word of the Lord. So we begin the Lenten observance week with the baptism of Jesus and the account of him being led into the wilderness. And as we reflect on this, considering what we have heard, and inviting you to think about what has arisen in you and how do you respond to that. Listening to this account of Jesus' ministry this morning, in this particular passage, I am mindful of a few things. I'm mindful of Jesus' humility. And I think that's what Lent carries with it in a big way. A significant dose of humility. We're often reminded of the putting on of sackcloth and ashes during penitential seasons as a way of bringing ourselves down as far as possible. Not down in terms of degrading ourselves, but bringing ourselves to a place where we are all the same. The wealthy, the poor, whatever class we are from. The ashes, to be covered in ash, is to just see ash wherever you look. And sackcloth. And not see fine raiment. And lords and ladies. But just persons. Just ordinary persons. There's a certain degree of humility that comes with that. And with that humility, one then is able to ask oneself some significant questions. Questions like, what does all my pomp and egotistic concepts of myself, what do they actually add to me? When I perceive myself as more than another, what does that really do? How true is that? Is there any truth in it at all? And if there isn't, then why should I continue it? Why should I belittle another? Why should I see myself as being of greater value than other persons? Why should I demand what I believe I'm due and not offer that same sentiment to another? Humility is about accepting the humanity of us all. And we see it in Jesus. We see it in Jesus' action. But I believe too, and I'm coming to understand as well, that the higher one grows, or the greater one climbs on one's spiritual journey, the greater the ease of being humble. Because as one ascends spiritually, one realizes that one is no better than the other. One has nothing more than the other. If one is asleep and one is awake, the one that is awake is not of greater importance simply because he is awake and he knows. Because the moment the other awake, he too will be awake and he too will know. So there is no difference between the two. And we understand that the more we rise in our spiritual walk. And I believe that's one of the reasons why Jesus made statements like the greatest of you, or the greatest among you shall be least of all. The master will become the servant. Because those are the ones that really understand, that get it. The second note for me in the short reading this morning is the wilderness, the barrenness of the wilderness, the wildness of the wilderness. Have you ever considered that as wild as the wilderness may be, or as wild as an area of land may be because it's overgrown in our estimation, if you ever go into it, you would be surprised at the order that is there. You'd be surprised at how ordered everything is. Each plant finding its own niche. The prey and predators operating in a way that maintains a certain degree of balance. Because the predator knows that if he destroys too much of the prey, there won't be anything there in days to come. So the predator instinctively takes only what is needed. So there's an order, which to us may look like wildness, but it's an order. And we need to learn more about that divine order, not the man-made order, which is like the neatly manicuring of our lawns and fences, etc. No, not that kind of order that looks false and it doesn't look real, but the order where life grows and life evolves and life fills in life's space. Life becomes. And each one of us is invited in this world to grow, to become, to fill in one's own space. But sadly, so few of us fill in our space because we are so impressed by what is outside of ourselves. What is the in thing? What is the popular thing? What is the thing that gives or generates the greatest income or return? And that's where we pour ourselves. And oftentimes it is not where we need to be. And so unlike the wilderness in its wildness that has its order, in our experience, there's a glut and scarcity. And the two never connect to create a balance and even it out. But on one side there's glut, and on another side there's scarcity. And the two never come together. You never see that in the wilderness. In the wilderness, there's the balance. So Jesus goes off into the wilderness to find his balance. There's a phrase, tempted by Satan. It's a personification. It's that inner place where we've got to be aware of those shadows. Those things that creep upon us and we don't even realize that they are pulling our strings. And when I say that, I can't help but remember that semi-cartoon picture, Ratatouille I think it was called, where this cartoon chef was under the hat of the chef, and he was pulling his hair, making him do various things and creating great meals. And one smiles at it, but in a sense it brings us a powerful message. Who's driving us? Who's directing us? Who's pulling the strands of our hair? For whom are we a puppet? For God? Not really, because you see, God offers us free will. So we choose. In every moment, we choose. But there are other powers that be, other areas that don't give us a choice, but they take hold of us and direct us, and we're not even aware that we're being directed. We think that this is our own thinking, but we're being directed, and we know this because on a moment when we catch ourselves, we realize what we've done or what we've said, and we're amazed because we didn't realize that that's what we did or that's what we said. And oftentimes we just cover it by saying, well, that's me, take it or leave it. But even in saying that, we are actually admitting that it really isn't me. And then finally, the other point that comes to me in this passage is there were angels ministering. There are always angels ministering. Man is never alone. There are always angels ministering. And we've got to be aware of this. We've got to recognize this in our lives. That there are always angels ministering to us. But we need only pay attention. We need to be aware. So that in being aware, we can utilize what is there. And in utilizing what is there, we can be helped. And in being helped, we can find ourselves responding properly to the invitation to come up higher. So, Jesus goes to the River Jordan. Jesus is baptized. He humbles himself. Jesus is led into the wilderness. Jesus wrestles with his shadows. And the angels minister to him.